of Tetrabiblos. I'm really
Interesting. Why? It was so interesting because today, at least this afternoon, I have another podcast
ah,
to Chinese area, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and yeah, and I was talking about it.
Tetrabiblos. Yeah. Well, because eclipses are kind of big right now. I was looking for it and it's gone. I
Yeah,
don't know where it is.
yeah, yeah. And I was show. I take my Biblos out just because I want to show them. There's only one page on fixed star. And that
Oh,
page, for me, that page already falling over.
handily removed for quick reference because it's been used so much. No, do you know what? I'm just saying I can't find my copy. It's literally
Exactly.
here. I put it down here earlier. I've just been looking for it for
Mandy,
5
where is
minutes.
your Tetra Biblo? Are we going to Tetra Biblo today?
Well,
Yes.
I think if we're going to be talking about eclipses, which I think we probably
Oh,
are,
damn it.
then
Oh, yeah, we have 3 different cover.
yeah, I know
Let's show it. Let's
Mandy
show
and
it.
mine are the same. I think
Oh, the
Mandy and I have
same.
the same one,
Oh,
and then
okay.
you've got the
My,
fancy one. You've got the fancy one in the middle.
not really the old one because it's secondhand.
Mine is stained. It's heavily stained. Yours. The pages are falling out.
Yes.
We're all working astrologers, so our books show signs of being pre-loved. I think.
Yeah, that's because I've been surrounded by so many traditional astrologer. Every time when they try to say Tetra Biblos this and that, I was just like, I couldn't tell them I never read it, so I have like. Hello everyone. Okay, let's start it. Hello everyone. Welcome to the Academy of Astrology UK. So this is the first week of the month. So we back to our faculty team. Today with us is Mandy and Marcus.
Hello.
Okay, so well, I think we have a very busy May, right? We have a very busy transit, isn't it?
Looks like
yeah.
it.
Yeah, I think there is like well, if you say there's eclipse and that's true. Solar eclipse, lunar eclipse. And at this moment, we have a Pluto stationary and ready to retrograde, and the Mercury is going to retrograde, and we have a Jupiter going to move sign. Oh my God!
Yeah, there's a lot, isn't there?
There's too many things going on at the same time. But today we're going to examine them. But I think we will, be very careful with time too. So, what should we start? Eclipse?
Yeah, I think. What do you think, Mandy? What's your?
Yeah.
Is Mandy frozen?
Mandy frozen. Mandy. Hello, Mandy. Could you say it again?
I just said, yeah, let's eclipse.
Okay, let's do eclipse.
and as you said that, your screen froze, which is just like perfect.
So how about we let Mandy start talking about this eclipse? So we don't need to,
Just to clarify, Rod, are we going to be talking about the upcoming lunar eclipse in Scorpio mainly, or do you want to start with the solar eclipse that's just been?
Let Mandy start.
Okay.
Mandy, what do you think?
Okay, so we've got a total lunar eclipse coming up on May the 16th. Around 25 degrees with Scorpio. We've just had a partial solar eclipse at 10 degrees of Taurus, which is obviously a conjunction of the moon and sun, and the lunar eclipse is an opposition of the moon and sun. And April the 30th was the partial solar eclipse. So there you go. We've got the chart up there. So 10 degrees of Taurus. What to say about that, really? I think it's, if you're looking at the eclipses as a pair of eclipses, you've got like a Taurus solar eclipse, and then you've got a Scorpio lunar eclipse, with obviously the sun opposite that, so that moon in Scorpio in Taurus. So if you look at that, because eclipses tend to occur in pairs, so sometimes it's quite useful to look at the pair of opposite signs. So you've got Scorpio and Taurus with this particular pair of eclipses. You're looking at themes of sort of emotional themes, desire, passion, control. There's a Mars energy with the Scorpio. There's a Mars and Venus energy. So you've got that whole Mars and Venus thing about sort of relationships, about sort of power and control in the sort of more Scorpio, and the Mars energy as well. And then obviously with the Taurus, you've got the Venus energy. So those kind of oppositions, really, that kind of opposition of those two signs is something that's thematically going to be touching people that eclipse touches their chart quite strongly, or if it touches things in the charts of sort of countries and leaders and that kind of thing.
Marcus?
Okay, yeah, I mean, a couple of things to say here, following on from what Mandy was saying about the sort of paired eclipses. This first one that you've got on the screen here, Rod, the one that sort of just happened at the time we're filming this, sort of happened last week, that the solar eclipse, it's quite wide. I mean, it's like 10 degrees away, and from the node, so it's not as intense, I'd say. I think it's only sort of visible from Antarctica and stuff, so that doesn't mean it's not relevant. I think what's interesting about this one is I've heard a few astrologers talking about it as quite a positive eclipse overall, because it's ruled by Venus, and Venus at this time is literally in its degree of exaltation in Pisces. So it's 27 Pisces conjunct Jupiter in Pisces. So that Venus could not be any better. So it's kind of like the conditions that result from this new moon eclipse near the North Node will be ultimately positive. Eclipses generally cause disruption, but the conditions that eventually result from it will be positive. And sort of I haven't had a chance to look it up in my copy of Tetrabiblos yet, but given that it's ruled by Venus with that Jupiter and Pisces, it may have positive effects on something as obvious as stuff to do with marine life or sea stuff, but it may also have positive stuff to do with women or the fashion industry, or all kinds of Venusian stuff, relationships and things like that. The interesting thing, though, to me about this eclipse, particularly when we go on to look at the next eclipse, which is much less positive, I would say, is that the nodes are squaring that Saturn.
You want to look at that one now?
Well, no, let's stick on this one for a sec, just because I think that the last thing I want to say about the difference between a solar and a lunar eclipse, the solar eclipse obviously is a new moon, and particularly as it's near the North Node, this eclipse is bringing new stuff in. And I say that because it's the double whammy of North Node as an entry point, a point of expansion, and it's a new moon, which signifies a beginning. So this is some kind of disruption involving a turning point to do with social boundaries, perhaps to do with restrictions, limitations, lockdowns, that kind of thing, because Saturn's at the bending of the nodes, Saturn's aspecting the nodes, and the result of this will be more liberation, more pleasure, more it's a new beginning that will bring in much liberation, I think, and this won't be true universally in every place in the world. It will depend how this particular eclipse chart sits on different countries around the world, but this is quite a positive eclipse chart. So it's like a new beginning is being seeded at this time. And then if we move to the next one, which is the lunar eclipse, which is the middle of the month, here we are. Thanks, Rod. This is a much harder eclipse, because it's a lunar eclipse, first of all, so it's taking the emphasis away from the sun towards the moon, and the moon is here in Scorpio, so it's ruled by Mars. Mars isn't terrible in Pisces, but Mars isn't that happy in conjunct Neptune, and the whole sun and moon are squaring Saturn, and the moon is a south node. So this is an eclipse that's going to be removing things because it's the moon on the south node, and it's going to be in that square to Saturn is causing, on a collective level, it's causing anxiety and increased sort of restriction and potentially health problems, and being ruled by Mars conjunct Neptune. It's sort of, so I think this is like fear of chemical weapons attacks, or fear of contagion, or so this is really interesting. We've got two very, very different eclipses. The one is sort of seeding this new beginning, which is feeling like a turning point in social restrictions that's going to bring about more liberation, more sort of people are free to sort of parties. Venus Jupiter conjunction in Pisces being a negative sign, I see more as relieving. I think I've said this before, the conjunctions in earth and water signs of good planets tend to me relieve negative conditions. So it's kind of like it's really helping with any to sort of liberate things. And then this one, just barely 2 weeks later, is introducing or bringing to fruition a whole set of circumstances which are introducing more anxiety and restrictions, perhaps around Mars conjunct Neptune in Pisces stuff. So some of the things, as I said, like chemical weapons attacks, contamination by pathogens. It's just this one's a mess, and I'm quite worried about this one personally, because it's aspecting my Saturn at 24 Leo exactly. So I'm not happy about this. And what's interesting about this chart in London, because you've said it for London, and obviously this will therefore affect the whole of the UK. You know what I'm going to say. It's got Algol rising with Saturn square the ascendant. This is going to make the people of UK a bit crazy. And the interesting thing is, in the UK, the effects of this eclipse, I think, will manifest over the coming year and will be at their maximum in about sort of spring next year, because the moon is on the western horizon.
I see.
The fullest effects will develop over a year's time. That's it.
Okay, Mandy, how you read this lunar eclipse chart?
Yeah, well, really, I agree basically with everything that Marcus has said. It is a very strong chart. It's interesting it's interesting sort of that the Martian influence of the eclipse, given that Jupiter in that chart has just gone into Aries, which is ruled by Mars. So that's really interesting, and Mars will be going into Aries very soon as well, and will be conjunct that Jupiter in Aries on the 29th of May, actually. So we might see something sort of around that sort of time, so you've got that kind of, I don't know, it's risk taking, it's sort of peaking too soon, it's all about Mars energy, spontaneity, it's kind of aggression, it could be sort of violence even, that kind of me first type of thing, survival of the fittest type of thing, because don't forget we've got sort of if you also look at Pluto, we've already talked briefly about Pluto is the modern ruler of Scorpio. So you've got quite a lot of very strong energies. I think things that could probably bubble up slowly and boil over, and things that could happen spontaneously. And it doesn't necessarily all have to be bad things, but we probably need to be on the lookout for not triggering anything that might start a fire, so to speak.
Yes.
So yeah, it is a little bit worrying, I think, this chart. When you put it on the UK, when you look at where right across the angles, and anything that's on an angle, as we know, anything very significant that falls on an angle
is prominent.
Especially something like an eclipse, because an eclipse is like that eclipse, it's a super full moon. So expect things to come to light, expect things to be exposed, potentially in a rather cruel or kind of like shocking way. I mean, you could talk for hours and make predictions. I guess kind of just looking out for the themes and sort of being aware. And I think what we can personally, because obviously Scorpio and Taurus is very much about the emotions and how to express them. It's about desire, it's about passion, it's about control, it's about maintenance. So it's kind of working with those elements. If you can recognize them in yourself, or in your sort of wider life, being sort of just trying to keeping that in check and being aware and perhaps trying to control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you've got that Mars energy that's coming in, that's ready to just kind of like go, no, don't be patient. I've got no patience. I just want to react.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah, what I think is, I agree with both of you say, and this especially particularly this chart has that flavor about when sun is aligned with Algol, and then when moon is in the Scorpio at opposite each other, there is the kind of you stare on something scary, and you have to control. And so when in this moment people try to control, either if they can control themselves, that's good thing. If they couldn't control themselves, they try to control things around them, and that will, that usually cause more problem and more frustration.
Yeah.
That's
just
interesting.
Briefly for viewers, could you just explain some of the themes of Algol?
Okay, Marcus, do you want to go there?
Okay. All right. Yeah, sure. I mean, it's a scary fixed star. Like the fixed stars are all different, and it does have some positive qualities. But briefly, Algol is a fixed star which is around 26 degrees of Taurus. Is it on the ecliptic rod, or is it north or south of it?
Quite
I can't
far.
remember. It's quite far from it. So this is 26 degrees of Taurus on the ecliptic, but it's not actually in the constellation of Taurus, is it? So it's quite a way away from it. But for the purposes of this chart, it's pretty much on the ascendant. That star, traditionally, its name means the demon's head, because I think it's a binary star cluster astronomically, so that when you look at it, it seems to sort of wink on and off. It has this this flashing quality, which means that it sort of had this unsteady light. So astrologers traditionally think of it as representing things like losing one's head, metaphorically or literally, and the demon's head, it was associated with Medusa's head. Of course, in the myth, Perseus cut off Medusa's head. Medusa's the sort of monster that could turn men to stone by looking at them, and he cut her head off. So the themes of this star are kind of people going crazy and losing their heads. Sometimes literally it can be associated with sort of murders and decapitations and horrible stuff like that. It's often a star associated with great money. Interestingly, Donald Trump has it on his midheaven, but it also is associated with controversy and opprobrium and difficulty. So it's a star of wealth, it's a star of murder, it's a star of great intense emotions and sometimes tragedy. So it's a very interesting and quite difficult stuff. The last thing I'd say about this chart is just as you mentioned, Rod, we've got the sun and the ascendant here in London and the UK on Algol, Pluto on the midheaven, the eclipse and the ascendant squaring Saturn. I mean, exactly everything you said about control and fear, and the way I see this is could be like something like the death of leaders or monarchs over the coming year, potentially because of that triple signification. Obviously our queen is quite old now, and this eclipse is operating over the following 12 months, so it isn't without them. But also we've got all kinds of shady business going on with government and leaders trying to exert control, which is it's just fascinating, particularly in the light of the previous eclipse, which was broadly speaking so positive. You know, it's almost like you have a tale of two countervailing forces here.
Yes, I agree. And not only queen, but I think the leader of country, because I just told Mandy, I briefly read the result of a local election. Tory lost in England, Tory lost more than 300 councillor seats.
Yes, I heard that. So
we just like, so is our Boris going to stand still?
I mean, look, I think from this, I would say heads will roll, right? Because you've got the sun on Algol. Sun generally rules bosses and leaders and stuff. You have both of the monarchs, the sun and the moon, in a terrible state here, right?
Yeah.
And then you have Pluto conjunct the midheaven.
Yes.
Saturn, the ruler of the midheaven. Saturn is like the opposite of the sun and moon. Saturn is like the bureaucracy. Saturn is it's not the common people, but it's like the sort of faceless bureaucracy or the laws. And here the kind of the laws are slamming the rulers in some way.
Because I mean the Saturn's still 10th house ruler. Saturn's still 10th house ruler. So eventually maybe he would go, but you know, as a parliament still controlled by Tories, so they
could be
someone.
Yeah. I mean, there's all kinds of shady business going on, and I could see sort of leaders, particularly in the UK. This is mostly relevant for the UK because of this chart being sort of like stabbed in the back or kind of removed or deposed or that kind of thing. But I mean, globally, with the sun and moon in this eclipse squaring that Saturn, we'll probably see over the next year or so. I mean, actually, I'm not going to say over the next year because it will vary. The timeline will vary from country to country, but we'll probably see over the coming months, I'd say, a lot of rulers running into trouble from they've maybe fallen foul of laws, perhaps as a consequence of some of their actions during COVID, or perhaps as a consequence of things that are going to happen in the coming months. I don't know, but it's kind of like Saturn is you reap what you sow, right? It's karmic.
Yes.
So,
Well, we've got a recession coming, haven't we? I mean, everyone's saying we've got a recession coming, and inflation. Come to that when we get to Jupiter, I guess. The idea of inflation certainly got a recession coming, a worldwide recession, and of course, then is it going to hit the UK very hard with that Taurus with Algol on the know?
Yeah, I both the charts, Mandy, even the positive new moon chart had that Saturn squaring the ascendant, right? They both the previous one, the new moon one, even though it was a much more positive eclipse, quote unquote, because it was ruled by that Venus Jupiter blah blah, it had 23 Scorpio rising. So both of the charts were squaring that Saturn. So I think you might be right. It's like Saturn squaring the ascendant is going to cause the people to have to experience some kind of restriction or deprivation.
And also we've obviously got the cost of living crisis, and that's the European wide thing, maybe even a worldwide, a world thing, because of the cost of oil and all the rest of it, the Ukraine war and the Russian supply of oil, etc., and all the sanctions. But UK is the only country in Europe at this difficult time that has raised taxes.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, which is really interesting when you look at the things we've already said about this chart, and the idea that sort of, things are going to get quite messy.
And just literally Saturn being strong, that is raised up taxes, right? Because Saturn is the ruler of taxation. Saturn very strong, squaring the ascendant, like high taxes.
And it's hitting the common people. It's hitting the common people. So it's hitting Aquarius, of course, is a common people. So it's hitting the common
and the moon is just your average person.
The moon is common people. Yeah, exactly. And they're in a square. And I think there's been calls for windfall taxes on fuel companies and fuel suppliers in the which have basically the government won't think about that. They don't want to do that. Whereas people can't afford their bills, and then they're raking in, these companies are raking in billions, like unprecedented profits. It's really
that you could also see some of that profiteering shady gubbins as the Pluto on the midheaven as well, right? Just the government in bed with those plutocrats, literally. I mean, that's and all kinds of stuff arising as well. It's also interesting what you said about the gas, man. I always think of gas as sort of Neptune and the Mars Neptune thing. You could see sort of wars over gas prices or strife over petrol and gas being that sort of Mars Neptune. And what you pointed out about Jupiter having gone into Aries, there's this really interesting reception between both Mars and Jupiter and Mars and Venus in Aries, because those planets Venus likes Mars, Mars likes Venus, and Mars likes Jupiter, and Jupiter likes Mars in those signs. But what's interesting in this chart is both Jupiter and Venus are in the 12th house, which is not a very helpful house. I mean, it might be beneficial for hospitals and prisons and charities, which is great. You know, that's good for those things, but it's not that helpful for for things in general. I wouldn't have thought so. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but I'm thinking maybe you might be right about issues to do with gas supply and petrol supply and the prices going up.
Usually people having to make sacrifices, people having to feel that 12th house, so people have to make financial sacrifices.
I think usually when I studied financial astrology, when Jupiter moves into Aries, usually it's quite busy time. The market is very active, and usually it's like usually it's upward, but
picking up.
There are few time picking up, but there is few time because we have to also see this could be the inflation, and this is happening now. We couldn't deny it. The inflation is happening, so you know this could be something very, very different. And when we talk about the global situation, it is very funny because this afternoon I was doing another podcast tour to Asia, so I know where in Beijing what is the MC degree. Indeed, it was 26 Taurus. And so you know what, I'm going to show you by map so we can see where they're going, we can see where they're going. This 24, 25, 26 degree of fixed sign are going all over everywhere.
So Beijing, just explain this briefly, Rod. What have we got? What are we looking at here, just for the audience?
This is the map. This is the astro map, which in a simple way, it tell us where on the world have this planet on the angle.
This is the lines here. This lunar eclipse. Okay,
this is the astro map according the lunar eclipse on 16th of May. So from this map, we will understand where on the Earth have the planet on the angle. So for example, the Saturn is so close to Ukraine and Russia. So when you turn the lunar eclipse chart to Russia, to Moscow, and to Ukraine, Saturn is on either side of ascendant.
Wow.
And if you see China,
the
sun on MC. MC. Exactly.
So right at the time of this eclipse, the sun is going to be right on the midheaven, and the moon is going to be pretty much on their 4th house on the IC.
So that is kind of quite pretty hot. Well, the US, you know, it's okay. Uranus is around Washington.
Not so crazy for them.
It's okay. Uranus on IC. So wow, you know.
Well, that's good. They could do with cutting a bit of a break.
You mean like some states, they say we will withdraw from the United States.
Oh my God! Yeah, I mean, look, I think we're still in the US. We're still seeing the fallout from the Great American Eclipse a few years back. You know, like just carved its way across the country, and then was sort of followed by all the aftermath of the Trump presidency and all of the unrest, the social changes that are going on there. It's fascinating. But yeah, they could do with catching a break. So I'm quite glad that this one isn't.
So you know, at least China, Russia, Ukraine, us, we are kind of involved. And well, I think for all the other country, the Saturn in Europe, Saturn will be also like us around.
Yes. And the curvy lines, Rod, are they the ascendant?
Yeah, this ascendant.
So you can see. I mean, but we've already looked at the chart, of course, so we know. But we can see that the moon is right on the angle in London there. You can see that the curvy line of the moon is going down through London. But we've actually looked at the chart, so we know that already. So interesting, eh?
Through Paris and then here. Yes. So this is the map. So
sorry, I was just going to say it all boils down really to to the idea of resources. And with that, again, that brings it back to that Saturn contact and a lack of resources. Taurus and Scorpio have something to say about resources, and we are having basically a war over resources at the moment.
Yeah,
one way or another.
Yeah,
it is
it's going
interesting.
to get worse before it gets better, I think, unfortunately.
Yeah. It's just interesting that, say that the previous solar eclipse, which I would unfortunately not regard as quite as powerful as this lunar eclipse, just because it's further away from the node, but that nevertheless is still bringing in a load of really positive, like that Jupiter Venus conjunction at Venus's degree of exaltation in Pisces. Traditionally that was called a communion, when you have two planets that are both in dignity in conjunction with each other in mutual reception, because Venus is ruled by Jupiter and Jupiter is in Venus's exaltation, and they're both highly dignified. That's a communion. And of course they're near Neptune, so that's kind of like spreading this healing balm over everything, that kind of could help a lot of things. I mean, it's not quite as good as it looks because Venus is exalted and Neptune's there, which makes everyone a bit delusional, but it's generally it's sort of bringing in with because all eclipses mean disruption, it's bringing in some disruption, but really good things to sort of affairs of Pisces and Venus and Jupiter. So I think it's bringing in more hope and a bit more liberation and a few more sort of, it's going to calm down a lot of sort of frayed tempers. And then unfortunately followed by this other eclipse, which I think is going to bring in some very difficult, hard facts. And that we, as we've already talked about, in terms of possibly raised taxes, inflation, lack of resources, people having to tighten their belts, increased control by governments, and rulers and leaders having to face the consequences of their actions, and really maybe some of them biting the dust.
I think basically these two different flavor could be happen at the same time, or could be described different level of things, like maybe in the everyday's life we are worried about the energy bill, we are worried about the lack of the resource, but in spiritual way, or in maybe like everybody's life way, I think we tend to be positive, or people tend to be be more positive and look at the things look at the bright side of life, because it's for last 2 years we are in the own kind of difficulty, and then so now it's like okay, people can start free to move, but there's more difficult things comes up. So how about we focus on Jupiter move into Aries now?
Awesome.
Should we?
Let's do it.
Okay, let me draw the chart first. How about Mandy, you start?
Yeah, so Jupiter's moving, and it moves, I think, what's the date of Jupiter moving into
11th.
The 11th, so it's very, very soon. Jupiter is, as we know, some of the things of Jupiter, we know it's all about optimism, it's about having faith, it's about confidence, but it's also about overconfidence. It can be about overindulgence. We've already talked about expansion, that Jupiter is about expansion, and Jupiter is like a big gas planet, astronomically, and it's about inflation. We talked about like a big balloon getting blown up. So Jupiter inflates anything that it touches, basically. So anything that we've talked about, whenever Jupiter changes signs, you'll see an inflation or an overindulgence or overconfidence in anything that the new things that come in. I mean, in Aries, for example, Jupiter in Aries, you've got all these, again, these Martian themes that we've already been talking, very Martian sort of themes, sort of time at the moment. We're talking about if Jupiter will kind of jump in and take a risk and take a gamble, so often will Aries too. It's spontaneous.
Hang on, could I just point sorry, Mandy, could I just point something out? Why is Jupiter at 0 Pisces in this chart?
I think I have some problem here.
I think there's a problem with the software, right? That's just doing something weird. Beg pardon, Mandy. I just noticed that. Do you know what I mean? I think the software is just having a burp. Yeah, I think it's fine. The chart is right. Just mentally correct that to 0 Aries, everybody.
Yes.
It's just the glyph is wrong. Sorry, Mandy. Carry on. I'm so
really
sorry.
Strange.
Yeah,
Thank you for spotting that.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
I think it's just the software doing a burp, everyone. Yes, it is literally, yes. it is the correct chart.
Let me move chart. 1 minute to see. Let me move a few seconds to see.
Yeah, it might just be, it's literally just having a burp.
Here we are.
There we go. Brilliant. Okay.
Oh my God.
Carry on, Mandy. Sorry
oh yeah, there we go. There we go.
Perfect.
There we go. Yeah, so, sort of Aries, has the reputation of sort of that energy of like jumping in head first without thinking and that kind of thing. So very different energy to sort of, we've been talking about Taurus energy just now and Scorpio energy. It's very different energy. It's very spontaneous. It's kind of just, things kind of just happen, like if someone is being very Aryan, it's a warrior energy. Well, if we talked about Scorpio is about the war. If we're talking a sort of that sort of fighting spirit, Scorpio is the war, but Aries is the battle. Aries wants to win right now. That kind of thing. And it's about action. Aries doesn't want to mess about. Aries wants to do something about it. So we talked about some of the issues and the problems that are going on in the world. Is Jupiter and Aries going to be a call, especially when Mars moves into Aries and conjuncts, which I think the date for the conjunction of Mars and Jupiter is the 29th of May. Are people going to turn around and say, well, enough's enough, what we're going to do about it, what's going to happen on an individual or a collective basis, for example? A few ideas there, but say a lot of Martian energy going on, action, fighting, wanting to get things done, that warrior energy, which can be a good thing as well. And I think another thing to think about with Jupiter in Aries, Jupiter is also about morality. It's about higher learning and higher power. So whenever Jupiter moves into a sign, there's always the opportunity to learn something about to express that sign individually or collectively in the best possible way. And I think one of the things with Jupiter in Aries is that idea of selfishness, but it's that idea of healthy selfishness. So how can we and the world practice and learn about healthy selfishness? And what I mean by that is looking after number one, which is an Aries thing, looking after number one with compassion and honesty and kindness, to look after yourself first. And by looking after yourself, you're giving a good example and you're able to look after other people as well. So that's my positive reading of Jupiter.
Marcus?
Yeah, thanks. I haven't. That's excellent, Mandy. That's really interesting. I haven't really formulated my thoughts on this a lot, but I always think of Jupiter in Aries as the sort of the evangelist. Like if Jupiter's sort of belief and philosophy and sort of brought higher sensibilities, and Aries is this, as you say, the sign of the battle, Mandy. It's like Jupiter and Aries is the evangelizer. It's the like going to war for your beliefs. So if you say that sort of Jupiter and Pisces maybe brought some degree of respite from things like Twitter pylons, Jupiter in Aries will enhance them because people suddenly get more righteous about what they believe in. So that's a negative potential for it, particularly with Mars and Jupiter in this generosity. With Mars, with Neptune and Pisces, at the time Jupiter goes into Aries, it's kind of like everyone's going to war on behalf of other people who they think are victims, and people aren't being in any way restrained in their self-righteousness is a negative way of reading that. On a positive scale, it could actually enhance people taking up the sword on behalf of the downtrodden, and that being in a positive sense as well. So I'm just very aware that kind of acting on behalf of others who you perceived as victimized can be a very messy and potentially dangerous game, because it's sort of like it's all very well to take up the sword on behalf of victims, but who decides who's the victim and who decides who's to blame? And I think that's the potential issue. This could, the way I see this is the Jupiter moving into Aries could really up any sort of blame game stuff that's going on negatively. More positively, it could perhaps enable people to take arms against a sea of troubles, you know. So like if people have been kind of struggling to get motivated and being sort of downtrodden, this could help them. So anyway,
very interesting. I like to go to the little bit mundane side, because I did a little bit of quick research about what happened during the Jupiter moving into Aries, but you know, this happened every 11 years, 12 years.
Yeah.
So it's very easy. But there's one thing, because it's also related to recent a geopolitical dispute, Russia and Ukraine. It's very interesting. There are two things are related. First things is because Jupiter in Aries, so we can say, as we all talking about the war, the fight, the conflict increase. This could be the expansion, and very interesting. And during this time when Russia invade Ukraine, also Russia blamed NATO expansion. But that's the main reason. You know, very interesting. So I checked the NATO's history. Since NATO founded, there's only 5 times they have the military action. The 5 military action. Let me read it for you. 5 military action is 1992, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and 1999 Kosovo intervention. This is when Jupiter in Aries.
Yeah, both
and
times.
Then, and no, only 1999.
Okay.
Only 1999. And the 2000, there's a war in Afghanistan. That's 20 years long for NATO involved in Afghan. Anyway, this is not Jupiter in Aries. But the 2004 Iraq is not in Jupiter in Aries. But next one, 2011, that's a Libya intervention. So only 5 major action for NATO.
Yeah.
Only 5. There's 2.
So that was the Bosnia and Herzegovina and the Libya actions had Jupiter.
Kosovo.
So Kosovo and Jupiter and Libya had
and
Jupiter.
Libya. But also, you know, the war in Afghan is
Afghanistan is like ongoing.
Yeah,
yes,
ongoing. Yeah,
forever.
And another one is Putin. Putin gained his power, become president on the 1999 31st of December. That's Jupiter in Aries. So he got his career Jupiter return.
Oh, interesting. So,
yeah.
Do you know? I don't know anything about the history of NATO, Rod. Did either of those two conflicts, Libya or Kosovo, involve Putin or Russia in any way? Politically, in the political machinations.
I think they definitely involve. I think. Mandy?
I don't know anything about the history, so.
Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, I think. Well, we know the. I think Kosovo is the whole history related to former Yugoslav country. So that's Russia more or less.
It's very tied
Libya
in.
Probably not. But I know Putin definitely, because this is related to his power,
I think that's very interesting, that there's sort of maybe a Jupiter return there. Is Jupiter a key player in Putin's chart? Do we know? Do you have?
This is what I'm trying to look.
Because we don't actually have it. We don't even know his birth date. I mean,
that's why. Well, some people maybe know, but I think I don't have his chart.
Do we have the chart of the day he came to power?
I don't. I haven't made any. Should I?
That might be interesting, because if you're saying we know the date when he came to power,
okay,
we could look at the noon chart for Moscow on that
Yeah.
date, because obviously the
Let me do
noon
that.
chart, the
Because we know the date now. Yeah.
yeah, because that
31st
midday, that
December
would emphasize.
1999.
I like using noon chart for either governments or drugs, because the 10th house symbolizes governments and medicine. So you put the sun in the 10th for if you don't know the time, and that'll emphasize that 10th house anyway. So
okay, let's try it. Let's try it. Let's try it.
Let's just have a look. The day when
this is when Putin comes about. This is not Putin's birth chart, okay?
No. This is just the day when he acceded to power.
Yeah.
Wow.
Interesting. So we've got the Jupiter in, and this is the Moscow chart. Fascinating. And we've got the Mars in the 12th. What's interesting about that, of course, is that Saturn right now is in Aquarius, applying to that Mars, and it's going to station at 24 Aquarius, so just before conjunction, go backwards and then go back over that Mars. So if this is the time when he came into power, that Saturn is really hammering the Russian people, because that the Mars would symbolize the sort of people of Russia, the ascendant ruler at the time he came to power. And Saturn is kind of him, because that's the 10th ruler at the time he came to power. But it's interesting. Yeah, that Jupiter return won't happen until early next year sometime, I guess.
Well, this is interesting, because all the theme about Uranus and Saturn is very clear in this chart.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. And look at that solar eclipse happening almost exactly on the Saturn of this chart, of when Putin came to power. That's the recent solar eclipse, the new moon, bringing in some stuff in the 12th house of that chart.
Let me do that.
Yeah. Let's see.
Look.
Wow.
And obviously ignore the ascendant and stuff of the outer ring, because that's all in London. But we've got the it's bang on the Saturn of this chart. So that's definitely bringing in some kind of disruption, some change to the leadership, some
authority.
And it's probably going to cause his authority to grow or increase in some way, because it's the North Node, but it's disruptive. And then that Jupiter Venus in the 12th. The 12th house is not a positive house. So that's fascinating, because you've got this very positive eclipse that's really impacting Putin and the leadership of Russia, that's bringing in these sort of very positive conditions in Russia, but they're only positive as regards charity and prisons and the sort of the 12th housey sort of welfare sort of thing. They're really not good for the people of Russia in other ways. And then can we get the lunar eclipse on the outside of this, Rod, just to see what the hell that does?
Third one.
Yeah, that would be interesting. Oh no, just do the bi-wheel and
I was like, oh my god.
So it's clearer. Yeah, too many charts. Too many charts.
Yeah,
so
I know.
That was the solar, and then
here we are.
Amazing, thank you. So yeah, this isn't picking up that Saturn quite as clearly.
No.
So that's not, but we do have now Jupiter on the ascendant. So that's really interesting. That's not, this is still though, look, that lunar eclipse is squaring the Mars, and we have Jupiter on the ascendant. So that's affecting the people of Russia under Putin's leadership, I would say. Because just to help interpret this in the chart is the chart of when he came to power. So it would be like the 10th house is representing him as the leader, as the king, as it were, de facto, and the first house in a mundane chart represents the people under his rulership. So under his leadership. So this it's like the people are here being benefited a bit through, but at the same time we've got the sort of the sun and the moon and that Saturn squaring Mars. So it's like it's really tough times. People. With I don't know what the hell to make of that. That's really fascinating. And of course the Saturn transiting across the Mars there. So this is all just like I'd need to sit with this for a couple of hours and work with
yes, because we didn't prepare for this chart,
No.
but it suddenly just jumped out and say, oh, this is quite interesting to look at because the when he get in power, Jupiter is indeed in Aries, and this come to his Jupiter cycle. So it's very, very interesting to look what's going to happen soon,
Yes.
I think
it's interesting to talking about the people of Russia, though, how any mention, we've been talking a lot about the Mars energy and the wars and battles and all the rest of it. Any mention of the word war in Russia now or any protest against the so-called military action in Ukraine in Russia will put you in prison
that's a very 12th house thing, right? So that's really, like you say,
prisons are doing good business, well,
it's that Saturn as the rulership, as the 10th house, transiting close to that Mars, the people of Russia in the 12th. It's like, do not mention the war or we'll lock you up.
You're right.
It's fascinating and
fascinating, isn't it?
Not
and
there's
also rumors of Ukrainians being actually deported to Russia as well. Being taken over the border by the Russian
humanitarian corridor only to Russia.
So there's been a lot of that, which is also sort of a kind of just has that kind of same feel, really, doesn't it?
I wonder whether this lunar eclipse chart, just speculating, it's like obviously this is quite oppressive for the Russian people, this lunar eclipse chart, because it's squaring the Mars with the Saturn on it. But at the same time, that Jupiter going on to the ascendant, Jupiter ruling the 9th house in this chart, maybe there's more aid from overseas. It could also be more refugees, both, from people from overseas arriving. So it's like the Russian people are really under the cosh, and particularly with the resources that Sun on Algol in their 2nd house of food and resources, the Moon in the 8th. That's really putting the squeeze on them. But with Jupiter on the ascendant, there's maybe some help from overseas, maybe some help from sort of religious leaders or that kind of thing. I don't know.
Okay, interesting, because although we don't have Putin's correct birth time and the correct birth chart, I just quick go on to the astro.com. The chart we have, we don't know the data is the valid or not. The chart we have is he was born on 1952, 7th of October. In this chart, he has a Venus in 11 degrees Scorpio.
Okay, so Venus 11 degrees.
Venus being touched, yes, and I think that maybe Jupiter is 19 Taurus, so a bit away from 25th, but well, I think I think we should stop here. Maybe we should talk a little bit about the Mercury retrograde.
One more thing. Sorry, one more thing I've just sort of thought of. We're again talking about the house, and we've got Saturn, the leader in the 12th house, for example, ruling the 10th. Is there's been rumours, unsubstantiated rumours, that Putin is suffering from very, very ill health. For example, there's rumours that he may have cancer, for example. So that's really interesting as well, particularly. And we talked about.
Yes, that's fascinating, Mandy. Also, because the Scorpio ruling the 8th as well, that Saturn going close to, by transit, the Mars, the ruler of the 8th in the 12th, and then retrograding away and then going back towards it later on. That could be like, not only is that symbolizing maybe the oppression of the Russian people by the leadership under Putin at this time, it's also symbolizing Saturn as the avatar of Putin, the leader, maybe getting close to, I mean, who knows, but getting close to some kind of at least very difficult treatment in hospital, that maybe, or getting close to sort of, could be surgery or stuff to do with his death, and then sort of like going away from it.
There's a rumor about it, right? There's a rumor he's going on surgery soon.
Interesting.
And then obviously then you've got that moon in the eclipse there, that moon at 25 in the
activating all of that.
Activated is highly
all of
likely.
That is very interesting. Worth following this, isn't it? And seeing
definitely.
Yeah. To be honest, this is the first time, not really first time, but out of blue, we mentioned about putting the day Putin get into power, and we use this chart. Also, we don't have his first time, but this chart is valid. They talk about something I think is very interesting, especially it's only noon chart.
Yeah,
I think we had enough Putin. Should we?
Yeah. Bad enough for Putin. Let's do something else. Yeah.
Put him away.
Last thing we want to talk about. Last thing we want to talk about is the current transit, the very famous Mercury retrograde. I think because we talk about it 3 times a year, so let's keep short.
Okay.
Keep short. But one thing I want to mention is this Mercury retrograde start from next week. I think it's from 10th of May and until I think it's the 3rd of June. It's stationary and ready to go direct. You know what degree Mercury?
Oh, I know all too bloody well. 26 degrees of Taurus, bang on Algol. Yeah. It's going to be sitting on Algol in square to Saturn for like 4 bloody days or something. It's it's not the best.
It's not the best. So Mandy, how you see this Mercury retrograde from?
Okay, so Mercury is in Gemini. It's the sign where it feels very comfortable. It's a sign where it can express itself. It's versatile, like variety and change, and change of mind, change of mood, all of that. Very highly communicative. If I'm going to give advice to myself, because Mercury turns retrograde very, very close to my Gemini ascendant, would be don't make any big decisions about what I do next with my life. I'm at the moment in a place where I'm taking a pause from most everything, and I am not, my advice to myself is to not make any big decisions until Mercury has settled itself down. So we're talking about a month really by the time it sort of it gets out of, because once it gets out of its retrograde, it goes back into Taurus, of course. Once it gets out of its retrograde, it'll go through its retrograde shadow, so it'll go back over some of the same things. So that'd be my advice to myself. But the wider advice is basically I've just sort of alluded to, with Mercury retrograde, it starts in Gemini, so there's going to be people are going to change their minds on decisions they've made. There's going to be a change of mood. There's going to be, it's a good time really to rest, reflect, relax, revise, review, and all those things. Anything that begins with basically.
Marcus?
Feels like a light topic after what we've just talked about, but potentially it's not always a light topic, Mercury in retrograde. It's just a common topic people know about,
No, interesting. I think definitely the bit while it's retro in Gemini is not so bad. That's sort of like Mercury retro, business as usual. The interesting thing to me about this one was it entered its shadow period, which means the bit where it's going to retrograde back to as soon as it was on Algol squaring Saturn the first time round, a couple of weeks back or something, a week or so, I'm not sure exactly when. But it's going to then go back to that 26 degrees Taurus and station on there and hang on there for a couple of days. So the way I see that is over May, particularly the second half of May, from sort of lunar eclipse time onwards. The second half of this month is, in my view, a complete arse. So don't make any really, just in general. I mean, some people, everything will be picking up their chart in a really fantastic way. So this isn't going to be universally true, but I'd say for the majority and in general, the space weather in the second half of this month is pretty rough. So don't make any executive decisions. I'd say there'd be a large amount of people than normal feeling depressed, making irrational decisions, not knowing what the hell to do, feeling stuck, and just generally in a bit of existential despair in the second half of the month and feeling all overwhelmed. And most of that is really probably out of proportion to actual events, because Mercury is the planet of the human mind, of rationality. On Algol implies losing one's head, losing one's mind in this case, and squaring Saturn induces depression and heaviness and like, oh, I can't make a decision. And so on a literal thing, this could be like, this is like the motherboard is not functioning, and you know, so particularly stuff to do with the logistics of things like food supply and meeting basic necessities. People might be somehow going a bit crazy about sort of organizing the practical side of life. So, you know, certainly for myself, I know I've got a very busy month lined up, and like I say, that eclipse is picking up my Saturn big time. I've already had a few health issues. The last time Saturn was in Aquarius, I nearly died. So I'm hoping not to repeat that.
Please don't.
Yeah, I'm going to try not to. I'm not planning to. And but according to all traditional astrology measures, I'm not going to imminently. So that's great. But I do think it's the second half of this month. I think what you said, Mandy, about not making any life-altering decisions and just trying to just be aware that things are going to be out of perspective, not logical, and not very stable second half of this month in general. As I say, there will be exceptions.
Sure. Mandy? That's brilliant, Marcus. That's brilliant and brilliant advice. And I think I would like to just add to that obviously Mercury will be retrograding back into Taurus if it's established. And I think what Mercury in Taurus is asking us to try to do is to have endurance and patience, which is exactly really, isn't it?
Yes.
Sort of fits, especially seen as there's going to be, especially as you said, there's going to be that square to Saturn, and Saturn is obviously the planet that needs us to be patient. It's patient. It's not in any hurry. That's going to be quite a challenge potentially for some people who might be triggered by all this Martian energy that's coming up.
Yeah. And also, you know, we know the lunar eclipse degrees, this degree 25th, 26th, Scorpio and the Taurus. So when Mercury come back to its trigger time, trigger it with the stationary. So I think during that time, the news and information, I think, yes, like you guys say, we need to be patient and steady, you know, not really make a rush decision like, oh my God, this happened. Maybe I'm going to change this and change that. Probably going to, you know, need a little bit more time to digest it and look through it. I think.
And I think that Algol is crazy making. So just be aware that, like, particularly, I think Mercury and Taurus, it's like the things that will be driving people crazy will be stuff to do with food and bills and stuff at the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You know, can I make ends meet? Can I feed myself? Can I whatever? And everyone will be going, the people will not have perspective at this time. So just be aware that, and the news will probably be hyping that stuff up. So just second half of May, just don't make any, don't it's not that it's not true, it's just that it's not good to base decisions for long-term action at that time. And like Mandy said, patience is probably the key.
Yes,
and fear-based decisions as well. That Mercury, you know, with Algol and Saturn, for example, at that particular point, you know, avoid fear-based decisions.
Avoid fear-based. Yeah, if you can not, I would say, delay any decisions, because that's just because Mercury on Algol is not good for making decisions, full stop. But also make the decisions later and rationally, because that is what Saturn in Aquarius is asking you to do. It's a very rational planet. Saturn is associated with delaying, restraining, having discipline, and Aquarius is a very logical sign. So Saturn is saying, never mind the fact that you're all going insane right now. Do not make a decision. Wait and think it over. And that's the advice that I am giving to myself at this time. As much as Mandy, you just
agree.
I think we've kind of come up with rather a theme for the rest of this month, haven't we? Which is basically metaphorically, don't lose your head. Basically, would that be a good sort of theme for us to sort of reflect on this month? Do you think?
I think so.
Yes, I agree. Wow, thank you very much. Thank you, both of you. This is a fantastic session. I mean, it's so busy this month. So remember what we say. Don't lose your head. Next week is the our mundane astrology discussion panel. So our panelists will join us, and we will talk about few different things. I think we may focus again on the lunar eclipse, but a more mundane level, and we get more time to prepare that. So, thank you for watching our YouTube live stream podcast. And I'm Rod. Today with us is Marcus and Mandy. Thank you very much, and see you next Friday. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone. Bye.